The simplest and most common type of order is a market order. In fact, when most people think of like, oh, I bought a security, or I sold a security, really what they're talking about is they placed a market order is what they're doing. And market orders indicate that you're willing to take whatever price is presented to you, when the order is executed. You could say, well, that's the market price as an example. Now, it's not a locked-in market price. You might see it on your screen and place the order, but by the time the order is executed, it might be slightly higher or lower than expected. So it won't necessarily be the exact price that you're seeing once, because it all depends on the timing of the order execution. Securities that are frequently traded will execute faster, heavy volume type things, but some things like some securities that don't trade as often and have very low volume, it might take a little while for that order to be processed to match a buyer and a seller. So a market order, very simply, I'm buying or selling at the market price. And then there's another thing called a limit order where you can kind of adjust that. And a limit order basically allows you to limit either the maximum price you will pay or the minimum price you're willing to accept when buying or selling a security. I'll place a limit order and say I want to buy, but I don't want to pay more than this, or if I'm selling, I don't want to sell for less than that, is the idea. And that's the primary difference between a market order and a limit order, is that a limit order may not be executed if the target limit price is never reached. So let's say the market price is at 70 and if you put in a market order, it would be executed. But if you, let's say, said, oh, I don't want to do that, I want to, I don't want to pay 70, I'm willing to pay 68, well, then it might not ever be executed. So limit orders are executed in the order in which they are received as far as from the online broker. So, possibly an order is not executed if a price hits the limit target and then moves below it real quickly before the order is executed. So even if you see it kind of flash like, oh, it should be getting executed, because there might be even more, a little bit more delay there, that might happen as well. So let's look at an example of that, of both of these. So let's say you have the security here, and you've done your trend lines, and you can see, oh, look at this nice trend here on the image on the right here, and you say you want to buy on the second touch, or near that trend line. All right, so you see that. Let's say it's on a daily time frame, and so you're going to buy on the second day. You've seen the second touch as far as the close. Now you're buying on the second day, and as you can see on that second day, there's the last candlestick in our image here. You can see there's a wide range of prices from high to low. I mean, it tops around 73, and then goes down as far as the range down to about 71. So if you place a market order, depending where you're buying in the day, it could end up at any of those prices. And let's say you're looking at it, it's around 72.75 or 72.80. You place a market order, and it gets executed. It ends up being executed at 72.75. So let's say that's what you're looking at in this particular example. But let's say you're looking at 72.75 and you say, well, I don't want to pay that. I want to put a limit order in. I want to pay less than that. This is a buying situation. So if you put in a limit order for 71.50, let's say, well, that would be executed. You could see, depending on how it all flows during the day, but as you can see, at some point, there's more likely a chance it's going to hit at that 71.50 in that range throughout the day, as it would have turned out. You don't know ahead of time. That's how it would have turned out. But let's say in this day, and you're liking this trend, you say, well, I don't want to pay more than 70.50 or 70.50. Well, then you can see it never really got that low as far as in the trading range. So your order never would have been executed. Then you would have to wait till the next day and place a different type of order, or cancel that order and place a different type of, either a market order or raise your limit order up. So that's the thing with market orders. You're going to be able to buy or sell right away. And then with a limit order, you're setting some guidelines around that in terms of buying or selling. And just understand that depending on what guidelines you put, your order might not be executed at all. And don't be disappointed in that. That's just all part of the strategy of using limit orders to limit, how high you'll buy and how low you would be willing to sell, to give you a little more protection around that. An all or none order, performs a certain purpose. So let's say you want to purchase a substantial amount of a security. You're buying many units or shares of a security, and it may take a while for the order to be completely filled, because you might not have somebody on the other side, let's say, selling that security. So they're buying it from several different sellers, many different sellers, to get you to your total amount, because you're buying a large number of units or shares of the security. So it may take a while for the order to be fully completed, and so you might end up paying different prices for different parts of the order, right? So because you're in effect buying from different people. different other traders. Let's say if you're doing, let's say, a market order, for example. But you can place an all or none order, which requires that the security be purchased in a single transaction or not at all. That's the key. I'm going to buy it all the substantial amount all at once, or not, or the order is not going to be executed. And that's what can be the downside of it. However, that also means your order may not be executed at all if there are not enough shares available to fulfill it in that all or one, purpose, so to speak, or all in one time. So your order will stay open until it's canceled or it's executed. That's one thing too with all or none orders. Typically, again, your broker will have different terms around it, but typically that's the idea of an all or none order, is it's out there and waiting to be fulfilled, which also gives you a little less control if it's taking a long time to be fulfilled. Another way you could approach it is with a fill or kill order. A fill or kill order means it must be filled immediately in its entirety, or it is automatically killed or in effect canceled. Thus, a fill or kill order may never be partially executed either, right? We're going to fill this immediately, or the entire order is canceled, or there's a certain period of time, maybe by the end of the trading day, where if it's not filled, it's killed at the end of a trading day. You also have the immediate or cancel as another type of order type, and that's similar to fill or kill, but the difference between this kind of trade order and fill or kill is that this order allows partial amounts of the order to be completed. So when shares are no longer available at the limit or a better price, buying or selling immediately ends in the order is canceled, right? So you're buying at a limit price, you're buying these shares, you're buying partial amounts, but if there's no longer immediate shares or things available, then the rest of that is immediately canceled. So fill or kill is like basically I'm going to fill everything in its entirety, or it's not going to be executed. Immediate or cancel means we're going to fill this immediately, and we're going to allow partial amounts to happen. But if it doesn't happen within a certain time period, in terms of what is determined to be immediate, then the order is canceled, or the remaining order is canceled. And a lot of orders are under day orders, and that's where they're good until the end of the regular trading day, at which point they're canceled if they're not filled. That's a real typical way all these are kind of worked. And all market orders, for example, are placed as day orders. If your order isn't placed by the end of the trading day, then it's not filled. So if you're trying to get a last trade in the last minute of the day, maybe it doesn't get filled and your market order doesn't get executed. In terms of that too, you also have what's called a good till canceled order. Is a good till cancel order remains open until one of three things occur, right? So one of three things is going to occur. Either your order is completely filled, which is kind of what you want. Like I place an order and my order is filled. Or I cancel the order. At any time you can cancel an order, so you can cancel it. So it's good. The order is good till canceled. Or a certain time period that's determined by your broker, your online broker, has passed. So it's not necessarily a day order. You might have terms around, let's say, a good till cancel order that's good for 2 days or 3 days, however, the time frame. So you could say, okay, I want my order to be completely filled. Don't cancel it by the end of the day. I'm the only one who can cancel it. But if it doesn't get filled by a certain time period, then it's going to be canceled as well. It just won't be canceled by the end of the day. So as far as risk with good till canceled orders is you may forget you placed the order, and then it's sitting out there for a longer period of time, and you might not want that trade to be executed over at that later period of time. So if you play, the other thing too is if you place a large trade with a good till cancel order status, you may pay, depending on your broker, a commission each day your order is partially filled. So let's say they partially fill today, they fill a little bit more tomorrow, they fill a little bit more the next day because that's just what becomes available. Then you're paying commissions or a fee on that because your order is being filled by multiple transactions over several days. Typically, if your order is filled by multiple transactions in a single day, your broker should really be charging you only a single commission is typically how it works. Again, each broker has its own fee schedule and how to look at it, so look closely at that, particularly with things like good till cancel orders or orders where there might be partial filling of it, to make sure you're only getting charged one fee and you're not just getting overly crushed for fees. So look at that fee schedule from your broker on that. But understand the good till cancel orders are out there until you cancel them. So just be aware that you might be putting yourself a little more exposure on that. A short sell order is related to shorting a security. And that's a whole big practice around shorting and how to identify short selling and all this kind of stuff. But let's walk through how the actual order works and what's going on with a short sell order. So selling short or shorting a security is a practice that enables you to profit if you correctly predict that the price of a security you don't own will fall. So that's the idea. You don't own the security yet, you think it's going to fall, and you're going to place a short sell order that's an order that kind of lets you take advantage of that situation. So let's walk through an example to make that a little bit easier to understand how it actually works. So let's say you think a security is overvalued, and we're going to use dollars again in this example, again, use your currency. But let's say the price is at $12.50. You say, that's way too high, that's going to go down. So what you do is you're then going to sell borrowed shares, let's say at $12.40, the price you believe to be, at $12.50, that is the price that you believe to be inflated. So you're going to sell these shares, you don't own them, you're borrowing them, and you're going to sell them at that. And then you enter a short sale order for 1,000 shares, for example, borrowing the $12,500 worth of shares, 1,000 times $12.50 each, selling them on the open market and collecting the cash, right? So I'm borrowing shares, I'm selling them for $12.50, I'm collecting the cash, and then if the security price does indeed fall, you can use the next type of order to complete your short sale and make a profit. That's the idea behind it. It's a two-step process. Thus, the next step in the process is a buy to cover order. This is where they work together with short sellers. So a buy to cover order is, let's say the security did as you predicted, and it did go down. It fell down to 10.50, right? So let's say it went down. You would place what's known as a buy to cover order to complete the short sale. Your buy to cover order would repurchase the 1,000 shares for $10,500 and return the borrowed shares to your online broker. That's kind of how it works, is you're returning these borrowed shares. And so you're purchasing them at 1,000, and because you bought the shares for $2,000 less than you sold them for, then you made a $2,000 gain, is the idea of using these numbers here as far as this example. So you're borrowing shares and you're selling shares, and you're doing in two steps as far as a short sell order and then a buy to cover order. And again, the whole point of short selling is you're looking at things that you think are going to go down in price. That's the whole idea, is it's a downward movement. So this is where your downward trend lines and things where indicators are showing a downward price move is where it's going to come into play if you want to sell short. Okay, some very important considerations with short selling. In order to sell short, you have to have what's called margin privileges in your brokerage account. That means you can trade with more money than you actually have in the account if you wish. This is the borrowing part. It might also be known as, it also is known as buying on margin, is the idea. And in fact, you're borrowing, right? So you're basically, using more money than you have in your account. You must maintain, though, enough purchasing power in your account to carry out a buy to cover the order on your short sale. So if I'm short selling something like for that $12,500, I need that amount to cover that. And that way, and where the margin part comes in, if the price of your short stock actually increases, remember, you're doing this thinking it's going to decrease. You're really betting hard on that. But let's say it actually increases, doing the opposite of what you thought, and you don't have enough money in your account to buy the shares back at the higher price, in effect taking a loss, you will face what's called a margin call. Basically, it's a common thing. It's a demand by your broker to put more cash or securities in your account to be able to cover the trade. So borrowing money on margin, or leverage is another way of saying what you're leveraging your money, can really either accelerate gains or accelerate losses. So if you want to get involved in like short selling, it's something to be very, really develop your education around that even further, to get really in depth around short selling. The technical tools that we're learning here will help you use the indicators to identify short, downward trends and opportunities, but there's a lot of this, ordering part that can be a big part of that as well. And so it can be a challenge. So for example, in the year 2020, many people thought that Tesla, as far as a stock, it is a security, as a stock, so for example, was overpriced, was way overpriced, so they shorted the stock. This is way too overpriced, we're going to short it. But in 2020, ended up what happening was Tesla rose about 700%, just a huge amount of rise in that. And it led to headlines like this, like Tesla short sellers have lost more than $39 billion betting against the stock in 2020. Because again, they're saying it's going to go down, and when it goes up and it goes the opposite direction, that's how they incur their losses. It's in fact the opposite of more traditional buying of securities, where I'm going to buy low, I'm going to let it go up high. I'm going to follow my upward trends. I'm going to sell at a profit. In this case, you're doing the exact opposite. You're betting it's going to go low. So just like if you buy and you think it's going to go higher and it doesn't, it goes the opposite way, you're going to lose money, is the same thing as selling short, just the opposite. I think it's going to go down. Boy, it didn't go down. It went up. I'm losing money. In fact, if it goes way up, I'm losing a lot of money. And if I'm buying on margin and doing those things too, which is part of short selling, and with some complexity to it, then it becomes even more of a challenge. So again, short selling, is something to be a little bit more aware of as far as some expertise around there. Whenever you trade a security, if you're an active trader, you want to put in stops at the same time if you're putting in, let's say, a buy order to help minimize your losses on the downside, because, of course, nothing's perfect. So you want to help minimize those losses, and in fact, that's also maximizing your gains by minimizing your losses. So we're going to talk about this important aspect, and we're going to look at 3 ways of doing a stop loss, a stop limit, and an interesting one called a trailing stop order. So we're going to cover those 3 here in this lesson. And you'll want to be familiar with all 3 because you can use them in different situations. So a stop loss is the real key one, kind of like a market order is like it's used all the time for buying and selling. A stop loss is used all the time as well. And really what it does, it's a stop order that automatically converts into a market order, in effect a sell market order, when you reach a predetermined price. That's the stop price is reached. So if the security falls and the price falls to a certain point, it hits my stop loss, the order is going to be automatically executed at a market order. And at that point, the ordinary rules of market orders apply. So the order is guaranteed to be executed. They're going to execute it, but you don't know the final exact price. I mean, if things are moving quickly, you might see a little bit more, loss from that. It's going to be executed at the market price and executed quickly. Now, a stop limit gives you a little more protection around that. In contrast, a stop limit order automatically converts into a limit order when the stop price is reached. Remember that lesson around buy and sell limit orders. So the minimum price you are willing to accept, so this would be a stop limit, would be the minimum price you're willing to accept when selling a security. So as with other limit orders, your stop limit order may not be executed depending on the price movement of the security. So let's take a look at an example of both of these so it kind of brings that home. So let's say you want to buy a security here. Here we're looking at that upward trend line here, and we are going to buy on that day that we've got highlighted. And let's say you end up placing a market order and it's executed for 72.75. So that actually happened. So let's say that happened. At the same time, or that's the order you placed, that is. And you could or should place a stop loss or a stop limit at some point as part of this. And let's say you place a stop loss at 70. So if the price was to fall down to 70 at some point, either now or into the future, could be days from now, weeks, months, years, whatever. If sometime in the future it falls down to 70 and hits 70, then it's automatically going to execute your stop loss order and turn it into a market sell order and execute that at 70. You could also place, or alternatively, you could place a stop limit. We place a stop limit, there's 2 pieces you put in. One is the price as far as the stop loss being active. Let's say in this case you like that 70, so you're going to put that in. But it puts a limit on what you would sell it at. So you'd say, okay, I want to put my limit at 69, which basically means you're not going to sell or tell the online broker, and it's all automated, don't sell below this price. So 2 things have to happen. Let's say I bought at 72.75, I put in a stop limit, I say, okay, my stop loss will become active at 70, in a stop limit order. And then if it hits 70, it's going to try to execute that. But let's say things fall quickly and reaches 69 or 68 or 67. Once it hits that 69, then nothing's going to happen. Your order won't be executed. So as you can see here, the idea is it's protecting you from something where it's going way down in price, and you're like, well, if it goes way down in price, maybe I think it'll come bouncing back up again. Or I know my security, if it goes down far in one day, it tends to rebound back the next day. So I don't want to sell at that point. I want to just have a stop limit at 70, but if it starts going below 69, I'm okay. Now, obviously, as you can see, there's no end in sight. So you want to be able to watch that, and you might need to cancel that order and just place a sell order, a market sell order, for example, if it starts going to 65, 64, 50, whatever it might be. So that's understanding how you might use those 2 orders. The most common, of course, is just using just a stop loss order. So once it hits it, it's executed, you're out. The third type that's very interesting is a trailing stop order. And it's one way to help protect gains and limit losses automatically is by placing this trailing stop order. And with this kind of order, you you set a stop price as either a fixed amount or a percentage of the current market price as the price, let's say, hopefully goes up. So you can choose that that you'll be entering in there. So let's say, for example, you bought something at 72.75, right? Let's go back to our example here, and it's executed at 72.75. You could place a trailing stop order of, let's say, 3. So that would be basically, if it goes below, as it drops below 3, whatever the current market price is, then the sell order would be executed. So in this example, I would say we bought it, ended up being bought at 72.75. Then at 69.75, a sell order would be executed if it ever dropped down that, because you set your trailing stop order in effect at 3. You could set that at whatever. You could set it at 1 or 2 or 50. You could set whatever you want it to be at. But the idea behind this is the trailing stop. The beauty of that is it's going to follow behind that market price. So if the market price, let's say, went up to, let's say, 80, your trailing stop order would be at 77. So you see how it's kind of locking in the profits as it goes up. So if we look at our example a little bit further, and now we can see what later happened, let's say, and this was a real security, so this is what really did happen. It's following it as the price went up, and the price peaked at, you see in the range of prices there, at the very peak, that top long upper shadow, about 74.50. Let's call it 74.50. So then your stop loss, or your trailing stop order would be executed at 71.50. So you'd be locking in some of those gains, right? Because you bought it. Or actually you wouldn't be, because if you bought it 72.75, if you let it go down to 71.50 as far as a trailing stop, then it would execute and you'd actually lose a little bit on this. So this is where you might want to be, adjusting your stop orders as you go to as well. Or just, your security, if it has a good trend, it's going to keep up going further. And if it doesn't, fine, you want to get out. But the idea is, let's say that did go up to 80. Now your stop limit would be, your trailing stop order, that is, would be now at 77, and you would have locked in a nice profit. So that's the idea of trailing stop orders, is that they basically follow behind as your price goes up and then are executed there. And by the same token, when you first place your order, if the current price drops right away and never does go up, it's going to execute once it drops, let's say in this example, once it goes down 3. So basically, stop loss, most common, just to kind of minimize your losses there, most commonly used. Stop limit, you can have a little bit of extra control on it, is what it does. And the trailing stop order is nice, especially as you start seeing things walk up in terms of gains, that you can kind of lock in those gains by adjusting your stop levels as well. And with all these, you can cancel and change your orders as things change in your current trade. Bracketed orders are very interesting because they allow you to get kind of the best of both worlds, where you have a target price, let's say, for profit maximization, and a stop type of order to limit your downside losses. And so it basically goes one step further than a trailing stop order, for example. So just like that type of order, with a bracketed order, you set a trailing stop as either a percentage or a fixed amount, below the security price. So you bought a security, maybe as a market order, and now you're going to put in your trailing stop is how you do it. But with a bracket order, you're setting that, but you also, in addition to setting your trailing stop, you're in effect also at the same time establishing an upper limit that, when reached, will result in the security being sold. So kind of like a target. So in effect, you're setting a profit target and downside loss protection at the same time, all in one order. So that's very nice. Well, I don't want to say most, but not all, let me put it this way, not all online brokerages offer bracketed orders, by the way, so don't be surprised if you don't see it offered there. You would just have to basically, use your stops and other types of orders to kind of, in effect, make that happen. But bracketed orders are nice and convenient that way. So let's look at an example. So let's say, here we are, we have this nice uptrend. You'd say you could buy at a market, or you did buy at a market order for 72.75. That's what was executed. It was at 72.75. Then you're placing a bracketed order to kind of, go around that market order. You're bracketing that market order. And so let's say you have an upper limit of, you decide this, you decide to set an upper limit of 74. That's your target. So you say, well, I want to have an upper target of this, and so I'm going to set at 74 to automatically execute at that if it reaches that upper target. But at the same time, in your bracket, you're setting a trailing stop of whatever percentage or amount. Let's say it was 3, just to use an example. So you'd be setting a 3. So at the current price, it would go, let's say, up to, it would be at 69.75, because you'd immediately put in that trailing stop of 3 if it fell down to that. But let's say it went up to 73, your upper limit wouldn't have been reached, so the sell order to, basically booking your profit would not have been reached, but also your trailing stop now would have changed to 70, because it now went up to 73. 3 minus 73 minus 3 is 70. So it would still stay active, basically, in that example. But let's say what happens is this is what really happened in this particular security. And as you can see, it went up. And the result of this example is you would have sold at 74, right? You set your upper limit at 74. As it turned out, on that long top upper shadow there, it did get to 74. And at that point, boom, it turns into a market order, and you're selling at the 74. Note that if let's say you had set your upper level was 76, then nothing would have been executed because you had never reached that upper target, and the trade still would have been active. Until in this example, it would have come back down and then be executed at 71.5, right? So, because you still have that trailing number there. And again, if you didn't want to have a target or upper order, bracket, then you wouldn't place a bracket order. You would just place a stop order to minimize your downside, and then you wouldn't have to worry about having a target hit, maybe before you wanted it to be hit. But the idea is, if you're trading a security and you know kind of the range of that security, and you're comfortable with that, maybe it's in like some type of chart pattern, like a rectangle or something, you can put that upper and that lower limits by putting in a bracketed order. So just a couple of brief thoughts around order types to wrap that up. And some order types are pretty easy to get, like a market order and all that as far as understanding it. And some order types are much more complex. So it's okay, to kind of review some of those lessons, or, try different things to try getting an idea of the order types. And that's another area where, like paper trading, practicing with fake money, basically, and with your online broker that has a paper trading account, you can not only practice using your indicators and your buying and your selling and all that, all for free, typically, all for free, and for, as practice, you can practice with different types of order types too, and start comparing, what's working well for you, what types of orders do you like, and what might be part of your overall plan. And also helps you understand the order types a little bit better too, because you can actually see them when they execute or don't execute, depending on the situation. So paper trading can be very helpful for that, in addition to reviewing the lessons. And understand lastly that order types are all part of your overall trading plan, right? So as we build out through the course here, you can kind of see we're developing an overall plan that's going to be your plan. I mean, it's your plan. It's not my plan. It's your plan. You're going to use these things you're learning and then start building it together in your plan. And part of your plan is going to be, what order types do you really understand well, that you like, that you can execute well. And you don't have to use all the order types. You just, want to make sure that you're aware of them. And then just use the order types that you feel the most comfortable with and are working for you. And then from that's just another part of your overall plan as far as trading, as on your way to, success with trading, is executing an overall plan from selection with indicators all the way down to using the appropriate order types for you. All right, in this section, we're going to talk about the spread and bid and ask prices, and kind of a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of trading here. And when you think of like, stock quote, and we talk a lot about stock quotes, what a stock quote is it's the price of the last trade between a buyer and seller, the last agreed to price where the buyer and the seller come together and they say, yes, this is the price. And so the stock quote is the last trade, and it's constantly changing. You'll see it just constantly updating as far as the stock quote. So those are real trades that happen. Now, in between, and when we're actually placing orders to buy and sell stocks, we have a bid and ask price, right? And so the term bid refers to the highest price a buyer is willing to pay for a specified number of shares of a stock at any given time. So the bid is the highest price a buyer is willing to pay. So you can see in the example above, be $22.12. The ask refers to the lowest price at which a seller is willing to sell, at $22.33, for example. And the bid, it makes sense, right? The bid price will almost always be lower than the ask or offer price. And the difference between the bid price and the ask price is called the spread. And you can see the difference is 0.21. And when we actually make the trade, you can see where we're going to click on that green button, but more on that in a second. So the spread is the transaction cost, right? So why do they have a spread? Well, there has to be somebody managing all this stuff, and there's a transaction cost there. So when a trade is made, traders buy at the ask price and sell at the bid price, right? So that's what they're doing in actuality. But there's a market maker, and the market maker buys at the bid price and sells at the ask price. And if we need to pause for a second, just pause the video here and kind of look at that and read that again on the screen if you need to, because it gets a little confusing. But market makers are basically, the folks behind the scenes that make it work. There's some that are just dedicated market makers, or usually brokerage houses, and they provide liquidity in the market. They kind of allow everything to kind of run, right? And they're compensated for taking on risk of holding until a buyer and seller match up. They're act as the middleman or middle person. So until it's all kind of processed, somebody's got to hold these agreements, these prices, and that's where bid and the sell and the ask, bid and the sell and the buy and the ask price, those are where those add. So the more liquid something is, which means the higher trading volumes, the lower the transaction costs, or the spread, right? If you've got a big company like Apple that trades frequently, there's less risk as far as finding buyers and sellers than something that might be a real small company or a penny stock that buys more infrequently. So if we look at that, you can see that stock A and stock B here. And you can see that the prices don't matter as far as this transaction cost. That's just what the stock is going for in terms of buy and selling prices. But you can see that spread is different, right? So if you were to look at this and say, well, which one has a lower transaction cost? Well, it would be the one with the lower spread, right? It would be the one stock B at 0.02 versus stock A at 0.21. And really what's happening, and it doesn't matter because the price is higher, what's going on here is that stock B has a lot more volume, a lot more transactions, thus a lot less risk for the market makers, and thus they can pass on a lower transaction cost to us. So in reality, when you're actually buying stuff, when you go onto your broker site and you want to buy some stock, you're going to click that green button, whatever it's saying, it's saying 162.88, you're going to go on and you're going to buy that. And if I'm on the other end of that transaction and I want to sell, I'm going to sell it at 162.86 on stock B, and you can see that 0.02 is just going to kind of go into thin air. That's what it's going to go to the transaction, to the market makers, to help that transaction occur. So if you're wondering what the spread is, when you're like, wait a minute, I just bought something, I already lost money because of that spread. Well, that's what's going on here, and that's just part of the cost of doing business. Even if, let's say you have a broker that's offering free trades, there's that spread cost in there as well too. So that's something to be aware of. And again, wrapping up, the more liquid or the more higher volume, the less risk for the market maker, the lower the spread. And you'll see that when you make a transaction, you'll know the spread right there, before you click the button to buy, so you can kind of get a feel for the spread.